Hello everybody and welcome to the RELO Bangkok and AUA latest website session. So we're very pleased to have you all here. I'm going to be the host today. Some of you may have met or seen me before. My name's Katie Wood, and I'm very pleased to welcome Trisha Smith-Pierce, who is an English language specialist with the US Department of State. Can everybody see her there? She'll give us a wave again. Hi there, Trisha. Okay, so today Trisha is going to be sharing on the topic of using oral reading in the classroom, or reading out loud. So just a couple of things before we get started on this great session, which I'm very excited about. So the first one is, if you have any questions, you can type them into the Q&A box. Some of those I might relay to Trisha and some of them we might leave until the end. Okay, and the second thing to remember is if you haven't already done it, can you set your comments so that it's sending to all attendees and panelists? Okay, I think that is all I need to tell you for now. Trisha can correct me if I'm wrong, but if not, I'm going to hand over to Trisha now and we can start the session, which I'm really looking forward to. Hi, Trisha.
Hi, I'm really excited to be here and I'm excited to talk to you about oral reading. It's something that I really love. So let me get to my next slide here. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is I want to get to know you all a little bit. I tried something different with the polls this time. We actually have 2 questions I want to ask you. So the poll will have 2 questions. So make sure you do both of them. The first one is, where do you teach? And whether it be primary school, secondary school, university, or other. And where do you live? Do you live in Bangkok? Do you live in Thailand? And that's outside of Bangkok. Do you live in Burma, Malaysia, or other? We want to see where we have you guys coming from. Okay, so Katie just put up the poll and we'll wait for some for the results, for more people to come in.
Okay, great. We're getting lots of answers here.
Excellent. Now the reason I wanted to ask this, because I thought that it might help me to get to know a little bit about where you are and maybe if there's specific points about primary school or secondary school or university, so more adult teaching, I can tailor some of my answers a little bit more to that. And it's always nice to know where people are from. I'm very connected to location. I think it's probably because I've moved a lot, but
yeah.
and so I'd love to know where people are located.
So we're nearly there. I think,
excellent.
Maybe 80% of people have given us their results. I don't want to spoil them, so I'll wait.
No worries, no worries, no worries.
75% of people have voted.
And of course, there's no right or wrong answer with this, right?
No, absolutely not. So as Trisha says, just a way to get to know everybody.
Yes.
Okay, so far, it looks like a bit of an even spread on the first question.
Oh.
And Thailand outside Bangkok is winning in the second one.
Excellent, excellent. Katie, do you want to go ahead and, if you close it, and then just go ahead and share it once you decide to close it?
We're missing a few people, but that's most of the people. So there we go.
Excellent.
And share results.
Okay, great. Oh, yes. Most are there. Okay, fantastic. I love this. So we do have a lot of different groups there. Okay, fantastic. So now that I've gotten to know you a little bit, I am going to share a little bit about myself, and it's going to be in relation to oral reading. So I wanted to share what really got me interested in oral reading. And to do that, I thought I would share a story about myself. I was learning Spanish and I was living in Spain, and I was having the hardest time learning Spanish. And I was studying it a lot on my own. And so one day I just started reading it out loud. And I was amazed at how much that helped me in pronunciation and confidence and everything. Now, that worked a lot for me. And so because of that, I really have been fascinated with oral reading because of this experience that I had. And as I went on and got more education about teaching English, or teaching a language, English in this case, it has been an area of great interest for me. So that's how I got started in this. And we're going to learn some tactics. Of course, when I was doing it as a student of Spanish, it was just on my own. And honestly, it was probably a little bit boring, but I was super motivated. But what I'm hoping to do tonight is to share some ways to do it that will be fun and exciting in your classroom. Okay, so first, so that we're all on the same page and we all know what we're talking about, I just wanted to go over a little bit of a definition of exactly what is oral reading. Okay, so first is the fancy definition, or the definition of by the academics, and that is the oral translation of printed or written material. So that's like taking what you read and instead of just leaving it in your mind, you translate it orally. Or I like the easy ways to just say it's reading out loud and using your mouth to actually vocalize what you're reading. Okay. So now we're going to have our second poll here. So if Katie, you could get that ready. And it's, have you used oral reading in the classroom? And with this, I thought, yes, I loved it. Yes, but it didn't really work. Or no, but I'd really like to try it. Or maybe the final one is, I have no idea what oral reading is. But, well, I mean, we just went over the definition, so, but you can still put that if it, before this, you didn't know what it was.
Okay. A lot of quick responses here.
Excellent.
So it's looking very positive, I have to say.
Well, that's great. And Katie and I had talked about this when we've been doing the practices and stuff. And so hopefully we can, even if it's something that you didn't really work out, some of the strategies that we talk about or some of the ideas we talk about can help you put it into your classrooms in a way that even if it didn't work out the first time, you'll be excited to try it again.
Okay, so just a couple more coming in. So far, we are definitely talking about most people have, or the majority have tried it and loved it.
Oh, excellent.
Give it 10 more seconds to give those last few people a chance to vote. One or two more still coming in. Okay, so I'm going to end the poll now.
Excellent.
And let's see what we've got.
Okay, look at that. Two-thirds said that they love it and they'd like to try it out. Some said it didn't work for them. That's great. That's good to know. So we can work on that. And hopefully for those that said that it didn't really work, you'll find some ideas that will help it work better in your classroom. Okay, let's move on to oral reading. Why is it helpful in language classrooms? Okay, so with this, I wanted to go over some of the research that has been done so that you'll understand that the research for oral reading, there's been quite a bit of research out there. So this is what they found and why it's useful in an English language classroom. That it helps the students' overall reading ability. It helps with motivation for your students. And I know that I had that experience when I was discovering oral reading on my own. It builds fluency and comprehension, and that's what I experienced as well. I have on here any other ideas. So if people would like to have some other ideas of their own that they've experienced on why oral reading is helpful, you can share that in the chat box. Okay, if you don't want to share anything, that's completely understandable. But on the event that somebody had some really burning desire to share, then I wanted to give you the opportunity.
Well, I wonder whether anybody will come up with the ideas that we talked about last time in addition to these. So far, I think people are a little on the shy side. Don't be shy. There is no wrong answer.
Yes, but even if you are, that's completely fine.
Okay. So interestingly, we have somebody is making the point, increase in vocabulary and in terms of pronunciation, which is the thing that we had talked about.
Yes, that is. So that's great. And those are some other reasons. I like the vocabulary one, and especially I'll show you at the beginning in the pre-reading activities how vocabulary can come into play with that, and as well pronunciation. Okay, so now I want to go over some activities to support oral reading. The first one we're going to talk about is whole class choral reading. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the whole class choral reading and go do a deep dive and talk a lot about whole class choral reading, what it is, what it looks like, how to do it, how do you pick a text, what are some of the benefits and challenges, and then we'll use some of those principles for some other activities that you can do with oral reading. Okay, so what is whole class choral reading? So this is from an academic definition. All students read aloud from the same text in unison with the teacher, who models accurate pronunciation, appropriate reading rate, and prosody, or that's expression. So basically, it's just saying that students, important principles, they read out loud, they do it in unison, and then there's a teacher there who is modeling the proper way to do things. Katie, did you have something that somebody wanted to share?
Yeah, I was just going to, because it ties in very nicely with this. A couple of people have talked about things like getting students to be comfortable with hearing their own voice, and you know, confidence and sharing. And also people have talked about helping with the difference in reading speeds. So doing an activity where the class is doing something at the same speed, regardless of their level of usual reading speed or comprehension.
That's excellent. I loved especially what people were saying about getting used to their own voice, because I have a friend that learned Spanish, and for whatever reason, her voice sounds almost like a whisper when she speaks Spanish, which is very different than her normal voice in English. And so it's made me think, and I've been watching that with other people, and I have noticed, this is not scientific, but I've personally noticed anecdotal evidence that sometimes people's voices do change when they're speaking a different language. So it is something that you have to get used to. That's my personal experience. And so I can really see, so I'm glad that people brought that up. That is to get used to your voice in that language. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually have you guys watch a video to see what whole class choral reading looks like. This is a classroom, and I like what the teacher did at the beginning of it, so watch for that, and how the students do it. So this was just to give us an idea of what it looks like to start off with, okay? I have to unplug my ear. Okay, here we go.
Line 37 on page 342. That's some good aromas. Remember, aromas is one of our vocabulary words. So at the end of the paragraph, we're going to do our vocab candy for aromas. Got it? Got it. All right, now we are going to choral read this paragraph together in unison. Remember, when we choral read, that means we're reading together in unison. Got it? Got it. Okay, we're at some good aromas. Ready? Some good aromas, we're drifting our way from the plate, leaking hot liquor onto the more.
Okay, excellent. Just give me 1 second to plug that back in. So I just wanted you guys to be able, oops, sorry about that, starting it again. Let me go to my next. Okay, so now what we're going to do, now that you've seen what it looks like, we know the definition, we've seen what it looks like in a video, I want us to do it together, okay? So first we're going to talk about before reading. First, before I do that, Katie, was there something that people wanted to say?
Sorry. I misinterpreted the spot.
No, it's okay, just I wanted to make sure. I saw you pop up and I thought, oh, if somebody wants to say something. So we're going to talk about what you do before you even start reading. This is a really important step. Katie and I were talking about this before, and one thing she talked about is in her experience, one of the reasons that oral reading is complicated for her is because people will just go and they'll just read the text together and it becomes really boring and it's just horrible. And it doesn't seem to be very useful. So one thing that is really great about this whole class choral reading and some of the things is this before reading activities that you do with your students. And these can help really make it a meaningful experience. So the first thing you do is you have to pick a text. I will talk more about that later, so I'm not going to spend time on that. I have another slide for that. And then of course you have to give the text to the students because they have to have what they're reading in front of them. The next step is you give background information, and I'm going to go into more detail on all of these later on. This is to just give you a preview. Then there's modeling, which is only the teachers and the student would read silently. Then you review tricky words or difficult words and phrases, and then you add expression. Okay, so let's do first the text. So this is like me giving you the text if you were my students. And so I will just read through the text. Brexit is a mix of the words British and exit. It is the result of a vote by British citizens in June 2016. A little more than 50% of them voted to leave the European Union or EU. Britain has been a member since 1973. So I have this text, and this might be a text for a social studies unit, or if you're talking about current events or something like that. So the background, why did I choose it? And I chose it basically because Katie's British and it's been in the news. And so for me, like, I would think about this as a current event, if it was a current event class or something that I wanted to share, or because it has something to do with a predominantly English speaking country, that might be some reasons, and I can give some background that way. And so then I would go ahead and do model reading. I did that a little bit before when I read it to you, but I'll go ahead and do that again. And I will show how it needs to be read. And then after I do that, I'll get to highlighting the important parts. Brexit is a mix of the words British and exit. It is the result of a vote by British citizens in June 2016. A little more than 50% of them voted to leave the European Union or EU. Britain had been a member since 1973. Okay, so that was the model reading. Now at this juncture, what I would do with the students is I would highlight difficult words and phrases. This is something that would be very individual to your class. What words might they know? What words might they not know very well and might need a little bit of help with? For this one, I decided maybe they wouldn't know what result meant. And so I would define that. Or maybe there's a word in here that you would put on your word wall and you would point and say, result, have we talked about that before? Let's look at the word wall. Do we have that up on our word wall? And maybe if we had it there, we could make that connection. Or if, like I said, you're doing a social studies unit and you're talking about citizens, you may have that word that you want to highlight and say, this is what citizens means. And voted as well. And maybe member. I don't know. These were just words that I chose that could be difficult for students. But what the word you choose will obviously be dependent on your actual class. Now this is the exciting part for me about the oral reading. You can help the students learn expression. So with this, I've highlighted some areas that you need to do. Now this one, there isn't any fancy, like there's no exclamation points or question marks, which is a place in English where we can give a lot more expression, but there are a few things. And the first one, you see the first period there, and this might be a good opportunity to explain that in English, the period is used as a way to pause, to give a little bit of a breath. So that you would say British and exit, pause. It is the result of a vote by British citizens. And then you would, in June 2016, pause. And then the other one I wanted to highlight is the or. So you could use that as a little emphasis there. You could say European Union or EU, and you would emphasize that. And you could have your students. And another idea you could do at this juncture is, even if your students needed it, you could have them talk about maybe pronunciation at this juncture, if there was a trouble with some pronunciation, or have them mark maybe where they should make their prosody a little bit better. You know, if you wanted to say Brexit is a mix and have them highlight, you know, mix, and they could make that be a little bit higher tone or something like that for emphasis. That's what you could do at this point as well. Just so that they can understand how the flow and the fluency of the of the text. So during reading is the next stage. So you've done all of that. It's been modeled. You've helped them understand expression, the prosody, difficult words, to understand the vocabulary portion of it. So now you want to do the during reading portion. So there's some very important things that you need to do there. First, you need to start together because it's in unison. For me, I'm going to always count down from 3 because that's just what I do. I'd say, you know, like 3, 2, 1, you know, go. But this could be anything that you do with your class to kind of get them together. The other important point to emphasize is it needs to be done in one voice, unison, one voice. And then as a teacher, you need to do it however you do it, but listen for some problems so that later on you can help fix those problems. So now we're going to try and do this together. We'll see how it works because it's just me and Katie. I did think last minute that I could have had some people call in. Believe it or not, I could have some people call in and I could have elevated them to panelists and had them help us. But thought of it too late. So it'll just be Katie and I. So what we're going to do is I will count down and then we will try and say it together. Now, I don't know how, we might not be in unison because the delay with the Zoom and all those things, but we'll try it. And at least we'll give you a flavor of what it's supposed to look like. So at this juncture, what we've all done is we've gone over vocabulary, we've gone over prosody, we've gone over all these things. So now it's just, you know, I've already modeled it as the teacher. So now we're doing it together. Okay, so I'm going to count down, Katie, and we'll start at Brexit. Okay? 3, 2, 1. Brexit is a mix of the words
British
and
Brexit.
It is the result
of a vote
by British citizens in June 2016. A little more than 50% of them voted to leave the European Union or EU. Britain has been a member
since
1973. Okay, not too bad this time. It was better this time than the last time we did it.
And
but with the delay,
just something I think to highlight, because it makes it slightly more difficult, because in the classroom, the teachers would not be describing the process in between the model and the repetition.
No.
So the speed with which the model had been done would be more fresh in the learner's mind. So I'm not the best example.
No, it's not. But I wanted to try and mix it up a little bit so it was a little bit more engaging and showing something. But Katie said that exactly right, that it would go straight from the model and then you'd count and you'd go like 3, 2, 1, you know, or like you saw in the video, the teacher there, they had already done it. They had done pre-reading activities. They were familiar with whole class choral reading. So she was able to say, remember, but she gave them some hints of, you know, we read in unison, you know, here's this vocabulary word, pay attention to that, you know. So there are some things there. Okay, so now the next part is the after reading. This is also really important because it gives an opportunity to talk about some difficulties, to provide some feedback, and then repeat all or part of the passage. With the repetition, I don't think I have a slide on this, I'll have to see, but that there's a lot of different ways you can do that. You can have it repeat it right after you do it, or it could be you could start it. Now, one thing I've done, you could introduce it on a Monday and just do it for like 10 minutes every day at the beginning of class. So there's a lot of different ways that you can repeat it. So let's talk about modeling difficult words and phrases, okay, or reviewing them. So this is a time when you can listen to what your students are having trouble with, and you can give them some feedback. So for example, I know in lots of places that I've taught, British, having the sh ending would be very difficult because, like, for example, I've taught in Spanish-speaking countries, and in Spanish, the sh sound doesn't really exist. So that would be really difficult, or it would be difficult for them. And then another one, I'll just jump to voted. That could be another difficulty because of the ED endings are always kind of tricky on how you pronounce those. So you might want to highlight, oh, well, I didn't hear this, or I heard that, you know, so just highlight what is the problem. And then another tricky thing about this particular passage is the years that I have highlighted here. The first one is 2016, and you'll notice, and then the next one is 1973. One reason this is tricky is because the 2016 can be said as 2016. And I don't know what I didn't pay attention to what you were saying, Katie, probably too.
Well, interestingly, I said it the same way as you because I tried to follow the model, but my natural instinct would be to say 2016. Okay. But in this case, I followed the model.
Okay, yeah, but I think that was something that, like, you could highlight to your students and say that both ways are actually correct in this case, right? Yeah. You can say 2016, you can say 2016, but maybe for the sake of this class, we'll say 2016 or we'll say 2016, whatever. You could just talk about that and that's okay. The other one that's interesting is the 1973. Katie and I talked about this, and I would never say, since 1973. We just always say 1973. And so that might be a good opportunity to highlight to your students about how dates, years are said, that they're coupled in the tens, 1973, but that the 2000s are a little bit different if they want them to be. But it's still fine to say 2016. Okay, so you'd review difficulties, and there may be other difficulties that you would find with your students, and you could review those. Okay, so now I wanted to give a little bit of a note about picking texts. The most important thing that I wanted to talk about with this was that you needed to use the average reading level for the class. Now, you will obviously have some students that are much better readers than others. It always happens. Or you'll have some that are really struggling with reading because it just doesn't make sense or whatever reason. But if you have the average reading level, and most students can do it, it will help the class. And so then other thing is the resources and what you choose. Poems I chose something, the News for You from American English, and I chose a little news article because I just thought it was interesting. Like I said, Katie's British, that's why I chose that. But poems are a great place to start. One reason is because they have natural prosody. They also have interesting expression you can add, and they can be funny. They can be a lot of different things. So poems are a great thing. You can also use leveled readers or something like that. And you noticed in the video, those students looked like that they were doing it out of a textbook. That's also okay. It was a story out of a textbook. And so that can be something that you can do as well, if that works for you. Just pick something in your class, and don't have it be very long, and then you can choose how you're going to do it. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about some of the benefits and challenges with whole class choral reading. One of the great benefits is that it's a low anxiety environment. Because the whole class is doing it together, your students get an opportunity, like we said, to hear their voice, to practice the speaking where all eyes are not on them, that they don't feel quite as on the spot, that they're as a group. It also helps with fluency, comprehension, and it can be fun and engaging, especially, like I said, depending on the text that you choose. It can be something really funny or exciting or something like that. Another challenge, but now let's move to the challenges, are making sure everyone participates. So this is always difficult. For me, personally, this is a lot about classroom management. I had a professor once that said management by walking around, and I love that. So for me, one way I would cope with that challenge is that I would just kind of walk around. I would not stay at the front of the class, and I would listen. The other advantage of that is you're able to hear the problems that the students have. You can see, or you can hear if some are having challenges with certain pronunciations or something like that. Another idea I had, I don't know if it worked because I've never tried it, but I thought of it when I was preparing this, that maybe you could have the students assigned to small groups, and they would kind of monitor each other and help each other with, if they noticed there was a pronunciation problem, if they could help each other out. I don't know. I think it'd be worth trying, and I would be really excited. So another one is that it's too juvenile. And I think, and this goes for more of our university teachers out there, and maybe even our secondary school teachers, that some people might see this and say, I don't want to do that with my class. My class, they're adults. They're going to think it's crazy. And I think that one way you can cope with that is first what texts you choose, but also deals with the next one. Don't overuse it. Have it be just something that adds a little bit of variety to the class, gives them some practice, and don't have it be always using oral reading in some capacity. Have it just be, mix it up a little bit. Okay, so now we're going to go into the next one, which I really, really like as well, and it's fun and exciting, and it's Reader's Theater. So what exactly is Reader's Theater? This is where your students get to perform. And so you get a script that's to the student's appropriate reading level. You don't have to worry about costumes or props or anything like that. You just have the script there, and then you assign the parts, and they get to perform it. So let's talk more about how you do it. So again, you have to get the text. Just like with Whole Class Choral Reading, you have to get a text. So on the resource page, I have there a bunch of different ideas or resources of where you can get these scripts. On these resources, there are scripts for 30, there's scripts for 6. So one idea would be that if you wanted to divide your class into small groups, maybe 5 or 6, say you have 30 students and you wanted to have 5 readers theaters with 6 parts each, they could each do a different readers theater. That could be one idea. Or like I said, in these same places, you can find some with parts for 30 people. The parts aren't very long, and so maybe that would be a good idea if you had maybe lower level students. You could have them have just really short, everybody have a really short part. That's an idea. So the next step of what you do is you assign parts. And with that, of course, you really need to take into account your students and understanding the needs of your students, because maybe you have some that you really want to participate and would just thrive in that environment, and then maybe others that wouldn't. So you want to assign parts in a thoughtful manner in a way that will most benefit all of your students. So then the next thing that you do is you review the parts. And this is similar steps to Whole Class Choral Reading. You would preview the text, you would help them with pronunciation, you help them with vocabulary, you help them get in some of the expression and prosody in these different things. And so all those before reading activities, don't forget to do those. And that will really help them. So then you have the students practice in their groups or as a class, so that they can get the flow and they can understand how it goes together, and then they get to perform. So we're going to look and see what this looks like in a video. You can understand this because they are little ones, little people here. Katie, you'll have to tell me if you guys can hear this. Oops, I just muted it.
She said they had a rule I couldn't bring into class or even into the school. She said she would return it. I haven't been so dirty.
Okay, let me put my earbuds back in. Okay, so you saw there that the students had their scripts in front of them, as you see here, and that they're taking their turns doing their own parts. And this is them performing in the front of the class. Oops, sorry about that. I did that again. Both times. I forget I can't push the button or it makes it play. So just to review somewhat with this one, some of the benefits and challenges. We have, like I said, an opportunity to perform. And you may have some students that will just really, really love that. And they can be in front of the class, they can be doing something, and they have the script there. So it's not like they have to think about what they're going to say, but yet they get to produce sounds and produce language without having to be so stressed out about it. It also helps with your fluency and your comprehension. It can be fun and engaging, like with Whole Class Choral Reading. And you saw there with those students in the video that we had, how they were really excited about it, and they added, I love their expression. That's why I chose that video, is because I loved how these little tykes, these little kids chose to add their expression in with that. Katie, was there something else that?
No, it was just interesting because we got a couple of comments with people echoing that and saying, yeah, the kids are so cute and really enjoyed this, the Readers Theatre activity. You can see that they're very involved and engaged.
So one thing about that, about a bit, I'll go through the challenges and then I have a comment about that. So I think the other challenge is if you have shy students or students that are hesitant to perform, it might be a challenge for them, but you can deal with that with parts and maybe that they have a smaller part or give them more support. Another one will be space to perform. And this can be a challenge if you have a room full of desks. How do you do that? So one thing I do like about Reader's Theater is because it doesn't take any props and it doesn't costumes and all those things, that you can just, like those students, you can just be up at the front of the class and the students can have their scripts right in front of them and they can be performing. One thing I wanted to say about how the kids were so excited to do this and they loved it. I feel like as teachers, as we're excited about things, even I've taught adults before, and sometimes, honestly, I mean, I'm an adult, but they can be really hard to get excited to do activities sometimes because they're like, I already know how to do all this stuff. But I found that as I'm excited about things, that it's contagious. And so as we're excited to do these activities, then, you know, maybe even though these were young students, even our secondary students can be excited about them and do them. Katie, did you want to add something to that?
I was just going to agree. I think I've done activities like this with young learners and adults, and if you go into it with enthusiasm, I found that sometimes adults are even more excitable than younger learners.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, is that so much of it depends on how, as teachers, we deal with the activity. You know, if we're just like, oh, I'm going to have them do oral reading, or I'm going to have them do buddy reading or something, then they won't be as excited about it, or, you know, Reader's Theater. Okay, excellent. So now we're going to talk about buddy reading. This is another really exciting one, activity where you can have your students be reading out loud. Okay, so I'm not going into this in as much detail. Every activity I'm talking about less is the way I decided to structure this. So what this basically comes down to is students read together in pairs. They're buddies or pairs. So you could call it paired reading, you could call it whatever you want, but kind of like the term we use is buddy reading. So there's two different things you can do. You can, as your students are reading together out loud, you can have them take turns by paragraph or page or whatever. And so if Katie and I were doing it together, I would read a paragraph, Katie would read a paragraph, and we would do that together. The other idea is you can have them read together, and so basically have the students in pairs doing a choral reading situation or a reading in unison. And that's just another, you can decide or let the students decide how they want to do it. Okay, so we're going to do another video here to see what it looks like. And in this video, what's nice about it is that the students are describing some of the different ways that they can do this buddy reading together. So let's try. Oops, I just muted it, so let me start it again. Sorry about that.
Okay, stop for a second, guys. So how do you take turns when you buddy read?
Well, some people do echo. Well, someone reads like a sentence or a certain amount, and then they say this thing again.
Okay.
Either or, you can read. They read one page and they read the next page.
Very good.
Or they just can read.
Okay, so plug my earbuds back in so I have a better microphone. So I really liked what the young boy here explained. He did say something that I didn't say, and that was about echo reading. That's another thing that you can do as you buddy read, and that's just, as the little boy explained, is that would be like if Katie and I were doing it together, I would read, what does it look like? And then Katie would read, what does it look like? And that's just another way that we can do this buddy reading. Oops, look at that. Okay, so what are some of the benefits and some of the challenges of buddy reading? One is confidence. Because your students are reading together and they're reading in pairs, there's, again, less anxiety, and they can just build their confidence in reading and reading out loud and forming the words in their mouth and the pronunciation, and all in this lower anxiety. Another possible benefit that you could really think about is peer modeling. And this has to do with how you pick the buddies. This isn't necessarily the case all the time of what you would want to do, but one idea would be that maybe you would take some of your higher level readers and pair them with lower level readers, or some that it's a little bit more difficult, and pair them together so that the peer could be, so that the more, shall I say, capable or better reader could model for the one that has more challenge. And another idea for this, and I just thought of this the other day when I was thinking about this presentation, is that if at the same time there were different classes that were talking about reading, and one was maybe an intermediate class and one was a beginner class, maybe you could speak with that teacher and have them be paired together and do the buddy reading that way for just a few minutes in class, or once a week, or something like that. That might be a way to do some peer modeling with reading, and that's something that buddy reading really works well with. Now, some of the challenges. One, did people want to say something about that?
No, I was just going to echo
Okay.
a lot of the comments coming in, echoing how it helps promote a reading habit for young learners as well.
Excellent. So true.
Getting them into the habit and the confidence of reading regularly. We have a little bit of a question, which I'll wait unless you want it now.
I'll do how about I do the challenges and then we'll do a question.
Right.
Okay.
Great.
So the challenges, especially I think from the classrooms I've been in here in Thailand, is finding space, because as you pair your students up, you can't have them right next to each other, like each pair right on top of each other, so that they can do that. So that may be a challenge that you'll have to run into. And of course, with everything with teaching, we have to kind of think creatively. How can we make this activity work in my classroom? Because we'll find all sorts of great activities online or at conferences or webinars, and then we have to take them and adapt them to our own classroom. So finding space is definitely one that would be a challenge with buddy reading. But it is something, like I've thought in some of the classrooms I've been in here in Thailand, you could go out in the hallway, or you could maybe have them go in different corners of the classroom. Some stay in their row, but then others go in different places in the classroom. And again, staying on task, always a perennial issue with this when you have students divide up into groups or small groups. And for me, like I've said before, one of my favorite ways to help students stay on task is to just do that, checking in with them, walking around and making sure that that if they have any questions, and listening in to do informal assessments, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Okay, Katie, were there some questions or a question?
There was just something that maybe relates to a challenge, or that you might want to address, which somebody was asking about. Would you, or could you, or any ideas about using these kind of activities with slightly higher students, sort of grade 10 to 12? Do we think that would work with them, or is there an alternative activity you would try?
So is that specifically about buddy reading, or like whole class choral reading, about all of them? Do you know, were they specific about that?
I'm not entirely sure.
Well, I'll just address both. I'll address all of them. I personally think that any of these activities can be done with any level, but you just have to be aware of who your students are, and you have to adapt it. Obviously, a lot of the videos that I had were of younger students. I kind of think that's because teachers tend to put more things online for younger students. It's just to let parents know what's going on and different things. But as you'll notice with the whole class choral reading, the video that I showed were probably like 14-year-olds. And so they were able to do that. Now, I think it can be done at any age. Of course, you have to adapt it. So picking the text is key who you're doing it with. You can't have really infantile texts if you're going to do it with adults. You have to think of something that's appropriate as far as ability, but also interesting. So that is a challenge, and so you'll have to know that. And with your, like higher level secondary students, maybe ready to graduate or move on, again, don't overuse it, because they're going to be a little bit maybe not as excited about it. So if you don't overuse it, you pick appropriate texts, things that they'll be exciting, which is really can be difficult if you have low-level students that are older, because often there's not a lot of texts out there that are good for that. But I would say try it. I mean, that's my thing is, I mean, maybe it's just my personality, but I think go ahead, try it with your classroom, be really enthusiastic about it. And I've done this with adults. And like you said, you know, sometimes if I'm really enthusiastic about it, they can do it. Did you want to comment on that as well, Katie?
Well, we just have a couple of comments coming in response to that, which I think are very interesting and very useful. So I think from May here has talked about maybe with adult learners or higher level learners, the possibility of incorporating the use of technology in buddy reading so that they record their own voice, which obviously opens up a lot of opportunities for self-correction and noticing, etc.
Mm-hmm. I really like that, because that's so true, that as they can read back and forth, they can get that, you know, that feedback loop from them.
Yeah,
that's excellent.
And yeah, I think that's a lovely idea. And also just a little bit of echoing of what you said about it depends on the text. You know, if you've got something kind of formal, that might be more appropriate for higher level learners or older learners and keep their attention.
Yes. So I really think that that's one of the I don't have it on here, but for older students and adults, that is one of the big challenges, is finding a level appropriate text that is also interesting. That's always one of the challenges. Okay. So just as we finish up here, I wanted to just go through some maybe other ideas where you can incorporate oral reading into your classroom, and you may not even think about that is using oral reading, but it does happen in the classroom in different ways. So the first one that I've seen and I've used is as an assessment tool. So in classes where I've worked, right after lunch, students have come in the reading class, and they've started, the beginning of the reading class would be silent reading. So great, 10 minutes of silent reading. You can use this opportunity and use oral reading as a way to do an assessment. You can call the students up, and you can have them bring the book that they're reading and have them read it out loud to you. And with that, you can get an idea about about what's going on with the students as you hear them read about maybe some of their trouble spots. So use that as an individual, or you could do that with small groups. If you have different reading groups, you could have them read in a different, in their groups, or buddy reading, for example. And as you walk around, use it as an informal assessment. Or if you had like a chart or something that you wanted to keep track of things and take notes, you could use it as a little bit more formal assessment. Another one, and I haven't done this, but a friend of mine did it, and I was in her classroom and I thought it was genius. She used it in morning meetings. So every morning with her class, as part of their ritual for starting, was she would write a letter to the students, and she would say, "Dear students," and she had she had some different reasons for doing this. She wanted them to understand how to write a formal letter and different things. So she would have them say, "Dear students," and then she would talk about what they were doing that day. We will be talking about this verb tense. We will be doing this, you know, we'll do that. Yesterday we did this, different things like that. And then how she incorporated oral reading is that at the end of it, it would be sincerely, you know, Ms. whoever, she would have either one of the students or a couple of the students read the letter out loud. So now that's just a small way, and that's the reason I wanted to highlight this, is that's a small way that you can use and incorporate oral reading that doesn't take a lot of time or a lot of energy, but you can have the students feel comfortable, get some of those benefits, and do that. So like a morning meeting, or if you had another class meeting, or instructions is another way you could do that. I don't have it on here, but you could have either a student or other students read some things out loud. Okay, so now are there any more questions? We've come to the end of what I wanted to talk about, but I want to see if there's any questions out there.
Well, I think what I did notice, and my technology limits stopped me from taking it up early, is that a couple of people have put their hands up as we've been going along. So I wonder if those people who had raised their hands with the button would like to type their question into the chat box or into the Q&A now, if there's anything that anybody would like to bring up from all these interesting points.
No, I agree with you. I've not got a handle on doing the raise your hand thing with Zoom. I'm not exactly sure how that works. I should do a video on it or something. But
so please feel free to type your question now into the chat box or the Q&A box. Certainly, I know that this, just while I'll get a chance to ask a couple of questions.
Okay, excellent.
So, which of those activities that you've done have you found that learners have enjoyed and benefited the most from?
The reason I did the deeper dive into whole class choral reading is because I really love that. And maybe I'm just really selfish, but I felt like that was a really, I've done it with middle schoolers. And so that's like, let me think, that's like 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, and they're in a really tough age. But it was something that at the beginning, they were just like, oh, I don't want to do this. But then as we started doing it, they really started liking it. And so I really liked and felt successful with whole class choral reading. That's just been my experience, but I think all of them can be. I was talking to another friend about Reader's Theater, and this friend couldn't say enough about how wonderful Reader's Theater was and how much they've used it. Now I've used it, but it wasn't something that I would just rave about, but I know that. So I think it also has to do with your own personality and how you use it in the classroom about what you'll find to be most successful. And my experience is I kind of feel like, well, I'll try it. I mean, that's just kind of my general thought in life is, oh, sure, I'll try it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But for me, one thing, like I said at the beginning, and it's funny because Katie and I, Katie, we talked about this before, is that it can be really boring and horrible. But I do think that if you put some thought into it and use it as a way to teach your students, oral reading can be a really powerful way for some of your students to learn. Now, Katie said that she doesn't necessarily, correct me if I'm wrong with this, that oral reading as a language learner doesn't necessarily help her, but it helps me immensely. Like as I've been trying to learn Thai, as I have learned how to read Thai, my spoken Thai has improved so bit. Now, okay, admittedly, it's still not awesome, but it has improved quite a bit. So I think that there are students out there that it can really help. And then I think but it will still benefit all of them.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say it doesn't help me. I initially felt like it helped me the most in terms of pronunciation rather than comprehension. But as we discussed, I think there's a very, which you've talked about, a very important way around that, which is to make sure that it's being read with understanding. It's not just a load of sounds being verbalized. So if we look at the things that you talked about with pre-reading, I think we can get the benefit for both things there. But now we've got quite a few questions flying in, so that's excellent. Great. So one interesting question, I think we've started to touch on this, but still, Richarda would like to know if you have a large class, like 50 students, it's pretty difficult to monitor them. Have you got any tips for that?
That is a huge challenge. That's why I was kind of wondering, and like I said, I was trying as I was preparing this, because the classes I've taught in have been nowhere near that size, not even close. So I was trying to think of ways, and I wondered if having people like almost in teams as you did it as the whole class, like that's what I was trying to explain with small groups, if that wouldn't be an idea of something that you could try, is you have 50 students, say, and then divide them into 10 teams of 5 and say, okay, you guys are there together. We're going to do this as a class, but you're going to help monitor each other. And if, one of you has a question about this word, you're going to discuss it as a group, and then, discuss it as your small group. Then maybe we'll bring it to the large group to kind of bring it down. And because that is always, when you have huge classes, it's really easy for students to get lost in any activity. And again, like I said, for me, one of my favorite things is that management by walking around, that as you're doing it, you're walking around and you're doing it. Those are two of the things that I kind of thought of. Do you have any ideas, Katie, with your experience?
I was just thinking, I think you've sort of mentioned this, but I like, of course, the idea of walking around is I think is essential to hear. I think maybe the thing about the teams that you mentioned, if they were well practiced in the technique, it could be that, you know, team by team, they read one line.
Yeah, that's
and then
a great
they've
idea.
got to pay attention, they've got to listen, because they've got to be waiting for their cue to come in. So maybe you could have, I don't know, 6 groups of 5, and you do sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3, sentence 4, sentence 5, sentence 6, or possibly, maybe a bit complicated, I don't know, possibly, after the modelling, and maybe they've done it as a whole class, the teacher could say, okay, group 1, and group 1 reads line 1, and then the teacher says group 3, and group 3 reads line 2, and then group 4, so that, you know, it becomes I've got to pay attention to when my turn is, so that we
yeah,
too much kind of waiting.
I love that. I really love that. I think that that's a great idea. I think that I would love to see that in practice, especially if you had a large class, as a way to break it down, you know, so that it can have the flavor of a smaller class in some way. Doing that. I love that. Other questions?
Right, we have, do you have any tips on how to encourage more reading for very young students, like kindergarten age, I think? Tricky one.
It is tricky. I will say one thing for me is I would encourage reading, especially at that age, generally. Like, of course, in their native language, like we're here in Thailand, that they read in Thai as well as I know we want them to encourage them to try and learn it to read in English, but if they don't know how to read in Thai and then we're trying to teach them to read in English, that's a little bit of it can be a challenge. So at least in my experience, for the really young age, encouraging them to read with their parents is another great way. Even if it's small, short books or something. And maybe if you can, I don't know what the classroom makeup is, but if you could, you know, send things home with parents, say, could you read with your student, you know, 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day? Honestly, the way I felt when I had, you know, because I have some children, when they were really young, as a parent, I was like, okay, if I can read 5 minutes with them a day, that's good. And I think as a teacher, as we encourage them to read outside of class, you know, that can help with their inside class reading as well. And then, of course, again, it's the picking the text and doing it. But as a kindergartner, you're going to have them have limited ability if you're talking kindergartner.
Sometimes
I haven't taught, in full disclosure, I have not taught that young of an age, just so you know. So I don't have tons of experience with like lower than 3rd grade or grade 3 in the US. So, but that's the one area where I really haven't gotten into.
Sorry, slight delay. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
No, go ahead.
I'm wondering about how some of these techniques you've talked about could relate to storytelling, which is a big part of very young learner classroom environments. So maybe even simple parts of a very simple text that are being read by the teacher as a story could be echoed back by students.
That's what I thought of too.
You know, there could be a little symbol where when the teacher does this or whatever it is, the class knows now we repeat what she just said in very short chunks while they're looking at the words.
Yes, yeah, and that's when you were coming on, that's what I thought of too. It like popped into my head. It was like echo reading. That would be great. You know, a great activity you could do there. As they get older and they learn how to read better, of course, then buddy reading, as you saw there, you can do all those other ones, like as your excitement. Do we have anything else?
We do.
Oh, wow, excellent.
Okay, we have, how can we engage shy students to read out confidently? And I think we've touched on this a little bit, but is there anything you'd like to add there, Trisha?
Well, I think for me, part of this is because I know that, I don't know if you'll believe this, but in situations like this, I am incredibly shy. If I were in a classroom trying to learn a language and having to get up in front of the class to read, I just like, it's horrible for me. So I actually understand that. For me as a teacher, what I have always tried to do is set from day one. And this again goes to the classroom management, where a lot of these, I think, problems are kind of resolved. Set a precedent or a rule or however you want to say it of the feel of the classroom. And David talked about this in one of his webinars, David Schmeckman, but about creating community. So if you have that community, even if they are shy, they can feel safe doing it. And then also setting it up so that, and I kind of mentioned this, but by giving them maybe a smaller part in a reader's theater if they're really shy and are worried about doing it. And the other thing that I have felt for me as a teacher is to be patient as well. And as you encourage them, and then again, the choral reading works well because they can do it, but the spotlight is not on them. And for me, that's what's always hard for me. And I think for other, shy students is as the spotlight's on them, or buddy reading, because it's a low stress environment, picking things like that and giving them opportunities to practice if you were to do a reader's theater where they're not center stage, so that they can feel really confident. So the practice aspect of it's important as well.
Yeah. Okay, we don't have any more questions as such, but it would be nice just to give you a couple of these comments that are coming through. People talking about how they've had a lot of fun doing choral reading of tongue twisters.
Oh, excellent. Good idea.
That has been great fun and very helpful for pronunciation. Other people commenting that it's surprising actually that adult learners still do have problems with reading aloud. This is a comment that it's not just young learners who maybe who can benefit from this to develop their skills. Chanakrit's talking about 60 students in their class and using recording their reading performances and letting their classmates comment, and then having a reading showcase online of readers' theatre.
I love that idea. I love that idea. Yes, creative ideas. Yeah. And if I can just stop, that's one thing I really like about what people do in the chat box in the webinars is that they do share these ideas. And thank you for sharing them so that people that maybe will see this on the YouTube channel can hear about these great ideas as well. And that we can all share and benefit, because I have my ideas, but I always learn so much from all of these. So thank you for sharing them. Okay, and we've got lots of people saying thank you and how much they've enjoyed. Excellent. So just to finish up, I am very grateful that you came and listened and participated with us, and we were able to share with you a little bit about what was going on and some ideas, and we could share with each other and make it a great moment to learn about how we can incorporate oral reading in the classroom. Thank you very much. Kap kun ka.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. On behalf of RELO Bangkok and the AUA Language Centre, I echo those feelings. Thank you very much for coming. I'm sure lots of great ideas there. I know I'm going to steal quite a few of them. And just one thing to mention, don't forget that obviously this is part of an ongoing series. So the next one, Trisha and I will be changing places, and she will be hosting, and I will be looking at using cell phones in the classroom. So a topic that is sometimes a little bit controversial. So what's good about it, what can be challenging about it, and how can we get the best out of it? So please join us at the same time, as you can see, on June the 4th. And also don't forget to follow RELO Bangkok and AUA on our Facebook pages, and the links for those were in the chat box at the beginning.
One more thing, if I can add one more thing. This webinar and all our previous webinars will be on the RELO Bangkok YouTube channel as well. So if there were some things you missed, or some ideas that you're like, oh, how did she do that, or something, you'll be able to see it again on the RELO Bangkok YouTube channel as well.
Great.
Okay, well, excellent. Thank you, Katie.
Everybody, and we look forward to seeing you again in another webinar. Take care, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.